culture is really very split on gun, anti-gun, liberal, conservative. There's some people that really would take serious issue in your workplace or somewhere else to see, a gun on you. And I think it gives people an opportunity to avoid that conversation.
That's Kurt Gelberg. We first introduced you to him last week. Again, he's the founder of Ideal Conceal in Monticello. After being called out in a restaurant for illegally carrying a gun, he decided to create a gun that was easier to conceal. So what you're looking at is his new gun that looks very similar to a smartphone. And we're joined now by Michelle Byington, an attorney who works a lot with gun laws. Michelle, given that he's marketing this gun, is it legal yet?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. So in my opinion, he may have invented a gun that is actually highly regulated by the federal government. It may be considered what's called an any other weapon. And keep in mind, this is just my opinion on this issue, but it may be called an any other weapon, which then falls under the National Firearms Act, and it requires registration with the federal government, and it actually requires only a $5 tax on the manufacturer's part. So an AOW is defined as a weapon easily concealed on the person and can fire a shot. So when you think of like James Bond weapons, like the pin gun, that's an AOW, or an umbrella gun, or a cane gun. Those are AOWs that are federally regulated, and he may want to seek out an official opinion by the feds, by the ATF, specifically asking whether this is something that falls under their regulation. Because if they decide that it does, he may be committing a federal offense, and then anybody who purchases this gun may also be in violation of a federal offense. So that's why I think it's pretty important that he ask the federal government, hey, is this something that is regulated by the National Firearms Act?
Wow, it's just pretty incredible, the things that people can create nowadays. And given the circumstances with issues with conceal and carry laws across the country, people making these type of guns, we have issues with even replica guns looking like real guns, and in situations where officers are having to have a split second to make that call, especially if it's a life or death call. Can these guns be dangerous in our society?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So the gun here that has been invented, the smartphone gun, only takes 2 shots. So it only is capable of firing 2 bullets. And that's not to, say that 2 bullets won't cause damage, because 2 bullets could absolutely cause somebody to die or sustain serious bodily injury. And I think it's an absolute concern with law enforcement. And that's why it is so important to teach gun safety to your children, or if you choose to own a gun, go get trained with it, know how dangerous they are, because the responsible gun owner is what we need out there.
And as far as, leading to accidental shootings, we just spoke about that. But do you think this gun could potentially benefit everyone in the sense that, a lot of people, they get uncomfortable when they see someone carrying a gun kind of just, hanging at their hip, exposed, and things like that. Do you think someone carrying a concealed weapon like this in the shape of a smartphone, do you think a lot of people will benefit from this in the sense that they won't feel as alarmed?
It won't offend their sensibilities to guns, in other words.
Right.
Well, I think that this invention is incredibly creative and very genius. But with that said, you can always just conceal your handgun. I basically don't go anywhere without my handgun unless it's prohibited by law. I don't walk into the courthouse with my gun by any means, but I just keep it concealed and I keep it out of plain view so others don't know that I have one, because guns are political. Guns are one of those polarizing topics that absolutely, if you walk in open carrying, which you may lawfully do, you may get some looks. You may get some side eye from people who, don't like that you have a gun, just because guns are political and they are polarizing. People are never really neutral about guns. So this is one mechanism to kind of ease people's sensibilities in that they don't know it's a gun. But at the same time, you could always just buy a small .380 gun and conceal the bad boy, and you shouldn't run into any problem.
All right. Michelle, before I let you go, I have one more question, just because, Gelberg mentions that if demand is high enough, he wants to make a semi-automatic version of this smartphone gun by 2018. Would he have a tougher time getting that gun onto the market, and what goes into allowing or stopping it from being sold?
Well, what happens if he is going to sell this on the open market? He's going to have to get his federal firearms license, which then requires the Bureau of Alcohol and Tobacco and Firearms to approve him. So he will have to become what's called an FFL dealer, go through the paperwork, pay the fees relating to that, be interviewed by an ATF agent. So there will be some red tape that he will have to jump through prior to being able to legally sell this out on the market.
All right, definitely an interesting topic, and one we'll definitely be hearing from here on out, especially with the presidential election coming up. Thank you so much for your time today, Michelle.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. Thanks.